Good morning and welcome to What's the Point of View? Communicating who you are and what you do. This webinar is running as a series of themed events focusing on from survival to sustainability. I'm delighted to welcome you to the Rebuilding Heritage programme, which is funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund under their Business Support Programme. I'm Sarah Murray, I'm the Project Manager on the Heritage Alliance's Rebuilding Heritage programme. There's a companion session to today's webinar, which is called What's the Point of View? Part one, which was looking at identifying your mission, and it will be available on our website shortly, the recording, so you can catch up with that. A little bit of housekeeping for you before we begin. Audience members, your cameras and microphones will be switched off throughout. Please pop your questions into the Q&A box throughout, as there will be opportunities to take questions all throughout the session today. The chat is switched on today. Do say hello, interact with your fellow attendees, and let us know about any tech issues. Do make sure that you have your chat set to all panellists and attendees if you want to share with the whole group. There's a drop-down option where you type into the chat and you can change who receives your messages. Karen, our trainer today, will also be inviting you to use the chat to interact during the session. Live captioning is available today and you can turn this on via your Zoom menu. The session is being recorded and will be made available on our website afterwards. So you can access it at a later date, use it with your colleague, teams, and share it widely within the sector. A little bit for you about the programme before we begin. Rebuilding Heritage provides training and support for the sector to help heritage professionals and organisations respond to the challenges of COVID-19. We're offering free resources, such as today's session, which will be openly available online, as well as one-to-one and small group sessions, which you can access by application. Applications for round 6, which is to receive support in September and October, are now open. Full details are available on our website, rebuildingheritage.org.uk. The application is quite short. We estimate it takes around 30 minutes to complete, and you can express interest in just one, some, or all types of support, including a small group training session focusing on identifying organisational storytelling, which will help you to develop further the learning that you might get from today's webinar session. This is the final round of by application support on the Rebuilding Heritage programme. The deadline for applications is 11 PM on Tuesday the 27th of July. Please do apply, we are keen to hear from you all, and do remember that you can also follow us on Twitter at heritage_RH and using the hashtag #RebuildingHeritage. Now, on to the session itself. I am delighted to introduce you to Karen Ackerman, Director and Founder of Media Stories, an organisation founded to support charities, voluntary organisations and community groups tell their stories. Karen is delivering the session on behalf of our media and communications partner, Media Trust. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Welcome, everybody. Hopefully it's going to be a fun session this morning. As Sarah's mentioned, there will be times when you can post things into the chat. I can see you're all firing away already and you're all used to posting in the chat, so please keep doing that. There'll be times when I will invite you to post particular things in the chat, and it'd be great if you get involved, because that's how we can obviously learn from each other and share experiences from each other's organisations, which makes the session even more rich and useful. So that would be great if you could do that. Just to tell you a little bit about me before we carry on. So as Sarah quite rightly said, my name's Karen. My background originally is television. I was a producer at the BBC, originally at Children's BBC. And one of my roles at Children's BBC was as a producer on Blue Peter. And as a producer on Blue Peter, I very quickly learned kind of how to tell a good story. My role was forward planning producer. And as forward planning producer, you're like the gateway to the programme. So people come to you with ideas. People will come and suggest a great story for the programme. And somebody might come forward and say something like, oh, it's National Potato Week next week, and I'm the PR person for National Potato Week, and we'd love our CEO to come on Blue Peter and talk to the children about potatoes and how wonderful they are. And I'd think, maybe, maybe not. But if they called up and said, oh, I'm calling from the National Potato Society, and we've got this wonderful young child who can tell you all about the potatoes they grow and can share with your presenters how that's done, you can see immediately how my eyes would light up much quicker. It's a great story. It's a people story. It's about a human person, a young person. And that's what we'd always be looking for. And that's some of what we'll touch on today. What makes a good story? What makes your communications compelling? Why will people care about what you're trying to do? So that's something we'll touch on a lot today. And something, as I said, I learned in my background in television. And as Sarah also said, since leaving the BBC, I've now gone on to set up my own consultancy, and I'm now running training for charities. I also give digital consultancy to charities around websites, film, anything like that. So that's a bit about who I am, just so you know a bit about me. Moving on to what we're going to do today, just so you get a feel for what the next hour is going to consist of. We're basically going to answer these 5 questions. And as we go through each question, again, I will invite you to get involved. If you attended the previous seminar, which was also about kind of what's the point of you, you would have thought a little bit about your why. Why do you exist? What is it that makes you different? What is it that you want people to know about you? And we'll be touching on those things today, but thinking more about how you communicate them. So how do you explain your story to people? What's the difference that you're making to your community? What does your audience want to know? And then importantly, how do you keep it simple for them? Don't forget, it's not about your language, it's about their language. How do you make sure people understand what you're trying to explain to them? And finally, what makes you different? There's a lot of heritage organisations out there. Obviously, there's a lot of properties, there's a lot of places people can go. What's going to make you unique and different so people will care about what you're trying to tell them? So we'll be working through those over the next hour or so. And there's one big question that kind of underwrites everything, that runs through everything I'm going to be saying. It's not just about what you do, but it's about what effect are you making? What are you achieving? Who are you helping? And there's a big thing just to have in the back of your mind all the time. So what? And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, why should people care? You care about your organisation, you care about your building, your property, your place that you work at, but why should anybody else care? And sometimes we forget that. We very much focus on our own work and our own organisation, and we maybe talk about things in a way that's interesting to us, as organisations or as heritage organisations. We talk about our research or our archiving, but maybe we don't always think about what's important to the audience, the people out there. And that's the thing to always have in your back of your mind. Why would they care? How do you cut through the noise? And again, that's something we'll be talking about quite a lot today. So, moving into the first of our 5 questions, your story. And what do I mean by that? I mean about what is it that you do that helps the people around you? You're part of your community, obviously. You're there, you're physically placed in the community. But how are you helping people? What can you do for the people that are in your organisation? And what I'll do as we go through this morning, I'll always show you examples of how other organisations are doing this. Some will be heritage organisations and some just other non-profit organisations, just so we can learn from how some of the best work that's out there. But at this point, I want to show you a commercial organisation who I think do this very well. Nike are often upheld as one of the kind of leaders in marketing, branding, and it doesn't hurt to learn sometimes from commercial organisations. Obviously they have much bigger budgets than some of us and different scale of organisation, but what they're doing can be broken down very simply often, and we can learn from it. So let's take Nike as an example. Nike is obviously a sports brand. Nike makes shirts, as you can see here, headbands, shoes, all those kind of things. But that's not what they talk about. They don't talk about what they do. They talk about their mission. They talk about why they're here. And that's about bringing inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And that focuses through all of their marketing. If you look, it's always about, it's just a couple of their posters, but their posters always focus on the athletes that they're trying to inspire. They want you to feel like you're part of the Nike family, that you could be like these athletes, that you could aspire to be someone like them. They don't tell you about all the things they do. They don't give you their history. They try and inspire you by the stories of the people that they're there for. So, we understand that. That's a simple example. And if you look around, you'll see a lot of big commercial organisations do this. So they have great storytelling. But obviously, you're not Nike. You're a heritage organisation. So what can we learn from this? What Nike does is they think about what's the problem here. Athletes need inspiration. Not everybody wants to go out and do sport or get going or just do it, as they would say. So they think about what's the problem. And then they put themselves at the middle of that problem. We're the hero. We can help you with this. We've got the solution. And they show you how they've made it better. They've made it better by inspiring all these great athletes and creating these heroes that other people can then follow by buying the shoes. So imagine if Nike, was doing what some of the organisations in the non-profit world or the heritage world were doing and wrote about themselves on their website a little bit like this. Now, this is their history. And when I looked up a little bit, I saw there are heritage organisations that on their website do this kind of thing. They tell you everything about themselves. If you go to Nike's website, they won't be telling you all this history. It's interesting, if you want to research the history of Nike, and I found this just through Wikipedia or something, but on their website, That's not what they're doing. They're not going through and telling you we were founded in 1964, our original name was Blue Ribbon Sports. Because going back to my original question, so what? Does anybody really care? That's not what people are interested in. Unless you're a historian of Nike, obviously that's a whole different story. What they actually do is, if you go to their website, the top line you see, inspiring the world's athletes, not founded in 1964 or originally called Blue Ribbon Sport. What they're telling you is we are here to inspire athletes, and that runs through everything they do. And that's something to think about. What's the one story you can tell that runs through everything you do? What are you doing for people out there? So what can we learn from Nike? What's your one key story? If you had to sum it up in a sentence, what would it be? What are you trying to achieve? You could think about, what does success look like for you? Is it, we're here for every member of the local community, or we know if you come to our site, you'll learn more about mining, or whatever it is. What is it you're trying to do? So let's just take a breather for a second. Most importantly, I'll take a breather. Have a second just to think about this. And maybe if you would, I can see you're all very, very able to post in the chat, getting involved. So a couple of people, if you wouldn't mind, be brave, post in the chat. What do you think your key story is? And then we can share them together. Obviously, I'm not going to, say anything negative about anything. It's only going to be positive, so don't worry about posting in the chat. But let's just take a minute. I'll sit quietly for a minute and just let you think about that for a second. What's your key story? And whenever you're ready, I see we've already got one. Great, so Becky's posted and tells us that the key story is preserving the history of Scottish Railways, which is good, a good starting point, but maybe you want to go a little bit further. Why? Why would someone be interested in the history of Scottish Railways? Maybe something to think about. To go back and again think a bit more about, what is it about the railway that makes it special? Why would people be interested in that? Just using that as one example. They're coming so fast. Let's have a look what else we've got here. So we've got Jane, who tells us saving a local swimming pool. Now that, again, could be very important. Again, push it to the next level. Why are you saving the swimming pool? Presumably the community wants to use that pool. So tell us that. Bring it to the next layer. Let's look at another one. Let's have a look. We've got a few, obviously talking about preserving heritage, making sure that heritage isn't lost. And that's obviously important. But again, take yourself back to that original question. So what? Why? Why is it important to preserve, to prevent the loss of heritage? And we'll get through that. That's what we're going to cover in the rest of the session. So don't worry. I'm not criticising anybody. It's all a good starting point. And it's about now taking it to that next level. We've got one, art can help people connect with each other. And that's great as well. That's really important. And again, an example there would be lovely. How has art helped people connected with each other? Obviously, I've put you on the spot, Catherine. I'm not expecting you to know right now. But taking this a bit further, you might be able to show some examples of how art has helped people connect. Just looking through again, just to see if there's anything else. And we've got Jen, who shares a really nice one about the garden, which says, connecting people to the power that plants have to improve people's lives. Lovely. And again, I know, Jen, you would, if you were doing this properly and you had more time, you would tell us some stories about how you've improved people's lives. So we've got some really lovely ones here. Thank you. I won't be able to read all of them, obviously, but there's some lovely ones in there, and I can see you're all really thinking about this already. What does success look like for you? How would you sum up your story? And each of these questions, I'm only giving you a minute or so. Obviously, this is top line. So if you want, you'll be able to look at the presentation later, and it'd be worth thinking again about how can you sum up in one sentence, and what is it that makes you really different in that one sentence. This is a nice one here from Joe, thank you. Saving Victorian and Edwardian heritage for communities around England and Wales to enjoy and help tackle the climate emergency. So you're giving us a why there. By sharing our heritage, we might be able to tackle the climate emergency, take it to the next level. So that's great, thank you. So lots of good ones there. I think I'll move on for now, but keep them coming. I might not be able to read them all out, but you obviously can share them with each other, and feel free to build on each other's. If you see a nice one, feel free to comment on it and build on it amongst yourselves. So that's our first question, just to recap a little bit there. What exactly is your story? And as I said, push it to the next level. Try and push it to why are you doing the things you're doing, not just what are you doing. And that almost leads us into the second one, because the why will probably be about the difference you make. I mean, as Christine touches on, the why is the difference is a better future for our planet, in her case. So let's think a little bit about what difference are you making to people. This is any particular property, but this is from one Heritage Properties website. We see these lovely ladies. What difference are they making? Are the property making to the people in their community, to ladies like these? So have a think about that, and I'll show you some examples again from other organisations. So this is an example. It's not a heritage organisation, obviously, but it is a non-profit. It's Comic Relief, and what's very interesting about them is they are an umbrella organisation for lots of different charities out there all around the world, and they're very good about always bringing you back to the difference they've made, not just what they do. So this is one example on their website. You've got How We Help stories. And then we've got this story here about Comic Relief gives people a leg up, not a handout. And you can see here, often our instinct is in our opening sentence to tell you, what we do. We are such and such a property, we are such and such an organisation, and this is what we do. If we look at the story here, they don't do that. They start by telling us the problem. In the Mumbai slum where Kajal lives, open sewers flood during the monsoon and rotting rubbish mountains grow even bigger. So it's only a bit further down. We get the problem, we get an understanding of the story, the personal story about Kajal and a lovely picture of her. But it's only a little bit further down in the second paragraph that we understand she's from an organisation called Magic Bus. And we understand the difference that they make is they work with slum children and teach them football to help them understand the importance of going to school. And often our instincts would be to have the very first sentence would be, we're Magic Bus, we're here to help children learn about going to school. But it's much more engaging to talk about Kajal and to learn about her, and to find out a bit more about her story at the beginning. And again, obviously your projects are completely different to this, but thinking about putting people front and centre and telling those stories and the difference you're making will bring those stories to life. So let's just break that down a little bit more. So we talked about, we had the problem set out at the beginning, the slums and the rubbish, the wider problem, 21 million people live in Mumbai, the bigger problem that Kajal and her organisation are here to help with. And then we get to how they've helped a little bit further down. Remember, not at the top. Recently, she's become an assistant peer leader with this charity. She's funded by Comic Relief, and she does this by teaching them football. But note, the importance of this story is not the football. It's about the fact that thousands of slum children are now growing up with the chance of a much brighter future. So again, it's just about imagining you're a big ship sailing in the ocean, and you're used to telling people about what you do. We're here, we're a heritage organisation, we do this thing. But just turn that ship around a little bit, rethink, reframe, and tell people about the difference you make. And that's going to be much more engaging than saying, we are Magic Bus, we are an organisation that teaches children football. Starting by saying, we make a difference to thousands of slum children through people like Kajal, you can see how that feels a little bit more engaging, a little different, and something you can hopefully take on board for your writing and your communications. And this is another example. Cancer Research are a very interesting organisation and chime a bit with the kind of organisations you may be, because their prime focus is research. Obviously, it's in the name, Cancer Research. And the work they do is obviously hugely fascinating. It's about finding cures for cancer, hugely important, but maybe not that engaging. It's about people in laboratories, white coats, test tubes, research. Maybe not as engaging and as exciting to the people out there. So what they did is they did this thing about moving the ship around, as I've already expressed, and they thought differently and decided, let's tell the stories of the people that are alive because of the research. It's not the research that's the story, it's the effect of that research. So here we see how that plays itself out in just one simple sentence. Thanks to research, I have many more happy years ahead with my dad. Now you can see there, it's not about them saying, we're Cancer Research, we are finding a cure for cancer, amazing as that is, we are researching in laboratories and looking for this. It's not about that, it's about the fact that this woman is here to have many more happy years with her dad. And if you start looking at their communications, you'll always see it's always about the people. They always bring it back to that and the difference they're making to those people. So again, let's have a little think. Let's take the questions you originally posted. Have another think about what can we learn from those two examples I've just given you, and going back to Nike as well. What can we learn from Comic Relief and Cancer Research? So to sum up what I've showed you, it's not just about what you do, and I'm sure lots of you know this, and lots of you are doing this very, very well. It's not just the research or the preservation or the academic work you do, or even just about the fact that your property is there. What benefit are you bringing to the people around you, to your community, the people that visit you, people that learn from you? Why would they care? Obviously, it's hugely important, your heritage work, and hugely important to everybody in your organisation. but why is it important to the people around you? And more than just preserving heritage, is there something else that matters to them? Is it because it's their local area, for instance? It's their heritage, not just heritage. It's preserving the heritage of XX town, wherever they live. Your family stories. Is it about, as we've discussed before, some of the examples here, climate emergencies or making a difference to the planet? Have a think about that. And some of you I know have already done this and are doing this excellently, but have a think. What is the benefit that you bring to the people around you? And let's again just take a minute, and I'll come back to you in 1 minute to answer that question. So whenever you're ready, I know you're obviously very happy to get involved. You've been doing a great job. So do start posting whenever you're ready into the chat, any way you think you make a difference to the people around you, your community. I'd love to hear some of them. Thank you, Francis. We've got one about engaging with individuals to build a common purpose. Again, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. You don't have to do it right now, but think, what is that common purpose? What do you mean by that? Again, use language that people understand and everybody will know what you're talking about. It's important to sort of really talk in plain English and sort of really explain what you mean for people that aren't involved with your organisation. And that's a lovely example. And I'm sure that purpose, I'm sure, is fabulous. It's about just sharing what it is and so people really understand it. So thank you for sharing that. That's a great example. So we'll keep that chat coming. Oh, yes. Oh, and preventing the loss. Yes, exactly. That's the common purpose, preventing the loss of your community heritage. Jen, that's a lovely example. Thank you. So we've got one from a garden here. Oh, they're going too fast. I can't keep up. Which provides access and engagement opportunities with nature to improve people's mental health. Now, you've done exactly what I've asked, pushed it to that next level. What's your why? Why would people care? You're improving people's mental health and physical well-being, evidenced by your track record and industry research. And take it to the next level. I'm really working you hard now. The next level would be telling a story on your website or something about somebody who says, when I came to the garden, I felt like this and it made such a difference to me. That's the kind of thing that people will really engage with. And again, here with the one about art further down from Catherine, using art to bring people together, to build friendships and help tackle loneliness. Lovely. It's not just saying we're here to share lovely art with you. Why? To help tackle loneliness. Lovely. And that, again, giving examples of that would be very engaging, very compelling. Helping people understand the beauty of military heritage and using it for cultural and society benefit. Again, I wouldn't mind knowing a little bit more about what is that benefit. I'm sure we can find reasons why understanding our military heritage would be of benefit to us. You can see I'm pushing you all quite hard, and I'm not going to apologise for that. It's about always pushing yourself to think a bit harder, think to the next level. And that's when you'll really get to something quite special and something really different. So let's keep thinking about that, keep posting. I might not go back to them again, but they'll be there and we'll talk about them when I can. But coming back here, what I'm going to do now for the next couple of minutes is show you some examples of heritage organisations that are doing this really nicely. We're going to do is post a link into the chat now to give you the full website of this. I'm just showing you a little example of it, Sailortown. But if you want to go and look a bit more, Sarah's posted the link, so feel free to click on Sailortown and have a little bit more look through what they're doing. But I'll just talk you through a little bit. So what I like about this is it's a regeneration project. And again, they tell you why they're doing it. We're opening St Joseph's as part of a people-led regeneration, not just because we want to preserve our heritage, important as that is, but to be of use for current and past residents and provide a welcoming space for those who are interested in our local culture and heritage. And this is only the top line. Obviously, when you go into the website, which obviously you can do by clicking on the link in the chat, they tell you a bit more about why it's going to be useful to local people. And that's really important, that people should understand why this regeneration is important. So it's presumably costing quite a lot of money to the local council, whoever, or wherever they've got the funding from. And it's important that people understand what's good about it. And they tell you on the website that there'll be a focal point for local people as a communal meeting place and to remember and celebrate Belfast's maritime heritage. So it makes it clear to you why it's going to be important, why it's going to make a difference, a place for families to visit. And they tell you the stories of the men who worked on the docks, who went to sea, the women who looked after large families. Again, they're making it very personal. They're bringing it to life on their website. So nice things there that you can go and look at and see what they're doing. A nice one that Jane, you've posted in the chat, the saving the beautiful local 1930s swimming pool. I mean, that sounds fabulous. You're taking a building that's, would have been a bit like this, to be honest, would have just rotted away, and reopening it as a sports and community centre to share memories from the past and create new memories in the future. And that's lovely. And presuming to be a swimming pool for people to use. I'm guessing you may not be being reopening as a pool, but to be a place for people to get fit again. All good reasons, and very much answering that question, so what, that we discussed earlier. So again, it's about how are we doing that? How is Sailortown doing it? How are some of you all doing it so beautifully in that chat? You're painting a picture with words. You're bringing it to life for us. It's about making people feel something. If you give people lots of facts and figures and detail, they might not remember it all. But if you make them feel something, they'll remember. And that's what it's about. It's about bringing to life with words and with emotions what you're trying to do, and making it a bit more personal for people, so that, as Maya Angelou says, they'll never forget how you made them feel. Now, this isn't just about me saying this is a good thing, with all this kind of storytelling and bringing things to life. There is academic evidence for this. I did a master's when I left the BBC in digital media, and I focused specifically on storytelling in the non-profit sector. And as part of that, I learnt about an academic study that showed how storytelling techniques can persuade people. And what this study showed is it posted an item on eBay. This is the eBay experiment that I refer to here. Imagine posting something on eBay, a chest of drawers, say. And in the first example, the person who posted it said, this is a chest of drawers, it's this many feet by this many inches, whatever, it costs this much, it's made of solid oak, end of story. Then they posted it again, and this time they said, this was my grandmother's chest of drawers that has been brought over through my family from Russia when she came to this country. It travelled over the sea with her, and it's been in my family for hundreds of years, and told a story about the item. And they ran this experiment across eBay with various items, and they found every time that when they built the story around the item they were trying to sell, it always got more engagement. It went for a higher price. And there were various other sort of academic experiments done, but that was one that really stuck with me, that just by building a story around something, you really can engage the people you're trying to engage in, your audience, in your case, your visitors. And as we've touched on already, it's about telling stories about people. Where relevant, I know it won't be relevant to every single organisation or to every single moment, but where relevant, if you can make it about human beings and about people, that's what people engage with. So looking at two examples of this is an example of just a post that a charity has posted. Find out here about our Pause for Fun scheme. Okay, fair enough, it's there, it tells us what it is. But how much more engaging when they post it with a picture, a story. It's just a sentence, it's not a detailed, it's not pages and pages of words, but just our Pause for Fun dog Molly really helps Addie and Nix's mum. And they even bring in just those few words. We get a sense that Nix has lots of seizures and can't really go out. So how lovely for them to have an activity that's fun at home. And just that one picture of the three people and the dog, and that one little sentence with 15 or so words, it's so much more engaging than that. This is very much about the organisation. Find out about our Pause for Fun. Well, why? Why would I care? Why do I want to find out about your Pause for Fun? Now I want to find out. It's interesting, it's engaging, it's personal. It's a very simple example, obviously, but just seeing the difference in those two examples and bringing it back to a heritage organisation. And this is done really nicely here at Beamsley Hospital. Lovely example where they're bringing to life this wonderful story of two aristocratic women who lived in the property, and telling us about the people that lived there, about why it's important, why their story matters, and makes you want to come and visit the property, makes you want to come and find out more. Again, I'll post the link to that one in the chat. I think I forgot to give it to Sarah, but there it is. So if you want to go and find out more again about what they're doing, because it's a lot, they give you the whole detail further down about Countess Margaret and Lady Anne, and tell you much more about that. And again, I know it's something lots of you are doing already, telling wonderful stories. But the more you can do that, the more you can bring to life the properties you represent, the better. And it's not always easy. Obviously, it does take work and storytelling, bringing to life the details. But if you do it, it will make everything richer that you're trying to do. Another example is Verdant Works. Just one sentence here. They're telling you why you should come to the mill. And very quickly, they kind of engage you by saying, hear the tales of the mill workers, see how they lived and worked in an industry which enveloped Dundee. Explore this amazing building. see and hear the machines at work. You can see how they're painting a picture, as I explained earlier. Step back to a time where the mills were the heart of Dundee. And they're just trying to really draw you in there to find out more, to go and visit the property, which obviously is at the end of the day what we're all trying to achieve, to find out more about the property. So have a little think again. What stories can you tell? Back to you again now. I'm working you hard this morning. What stories can you tell? Are there people that have been involved in your properties or involved in your organisation or in trying to save the place you're trying to save? Or anything personal you can share with us? You may not know these off the top of your head, obviously. I don't expect you just to pluck stories out. But even if for the purpose of the argument, for the purpose of the exercise, if they're just slightly embellishing what you know, but the kind of stories you can tell. Obviously, in the real world, you're going to make sure they're, you've backed all your facts up. But for the purpose of this exercise, you can just give us a vague feel for the kind of stories you may be able to tell about your organisation and paint a picture for us of why we should come. By the end of today, I want to come to all the places you represent by the stories you're telling me. So have a little think about the kind of things you can tell us. Again, I'm going to give you another minute while I have another sip of water. I will be back in a minute. Okay, back again. So I only give you a few minutes for these things, but they're all things you can go away and think about again. So we've had one from Joe, thank you. Now that's interesting, actually. Thank you, Joe, because you've told us about the people who volunteered with you. And sometimes people forget about their volunteers. They're lovely stories to tell. A lot of places have volunteers who come and help or get involved with the property. Yeah, so definitely don't forget your staff, your volunteers, your local community we've talked about. In this case, we've talked, Francis is talking about the educators, absolutely. The people that are knowledgeable and have knowledge and information to share. That's lovely stories. So thank you for that. Lots of ideas. Yeah, again, keep them coming. Even if I move on, we can still flip back to them. Oh, hang on. I'm just going to pause a minute because... See, Jen, you got me there because your opening words were, we have a great story. I haven't read anything else yet, but just seeing those words grabs me. Don't ever forget, if you just use that in your communications, I want to tell you a fabulous story about so-and-so and such and such. People sit up when they hear those words. Let me tell you a story. So I'm going to read Jen's now. We have a great story about a local hospital patient who came on an unaccompanied visit to the garden, which was the first time she'd left the hospital in 16 weeks. The highlight for me was her saying she could breathe better. That's beautiful. That's absolutely lovely. Thank you. That's really helpful. And exactly the right kind of thing. It's totally engaging. Really shows you've answered, all of our story, all of our two questions so far. What's your story and what difference do you make? We've got that already there. Thank you. And Claire's pointed out that, there's probably more stories that they could be telling where she works. So thank you for that. I think you're absolutely right. The people behind, I talk about this a little bit later, but the people behind the scenes are always really good stories, and we'll come a bit to that later when we talk about the unique details. Yes, I'm absolutely fascinated to hear the story of women working in the railways during the wars. I mean, that sounds fascinating. I don't know if you're already doing that, Becky, but if you're not, please do and do it more. But that sounds great. So all these questions obviously link together. But getting to question 3 as we move through our time, what does your audience really want to know? I mean, they all overlap. We've touched on this a little bit, but moving a bit more through this one. What does your audience really want to know? So thinking about some of the people that visit your property. So this is what not to do. I've lifted this, moved it around a bit, obviously, so we don't embarrass anybody, but this is from a unknown heritage organisation's website. And the opening thing that they do is start telling you a bit. I showed you this example, obviously, a bit with Nike earlier, what not to do. Things to avoid. Telling us everything about you, what kind of organisation you are. I mean, I'm guessing not many people would go quite into this much detail. But you're telling us all about your organisation and how you're made up, what it is that you do, without thinking about what do I care about as one of your visitors. Whereas this is the opposite example. Very simple, very few words, but I can immediately see if I go to Dover Castle, what's in it for me? These are the things I can see and do, all these lovely things, all the wonderful things I'm going to find out about if I come to Dover Castle. And most importantly, in one sentence, they explore 2,000 years of history. It's going to be an action-packed day, and it's very simple. And another nice one here from Hampton Court. Again, I know these are big organisations, but looking at what they're doing is nice. What I like what they do here is putting you at the centre, you the user. You're going to come and visit Hampton Court. And what happens if you do? You'll experience the public dramas and private lives of Henry VIII, his wives and children in the world of the Tudor court. And if I go there, I'm going to be able to explore the Great Hall. I'm going to be able to see all these things, and really, really put myself at the centre of Henry VIII's world. Again, you can look at all of these and find out a bit more about how they do it. I'll post a link to Hampton Court there. And what's quite nice, if you look at the Hampton Court one, very quickly on their homepage, we've got the bit I've shown you here, and then directly under that is very quickly the things I need to know. Opening time, ticket and prices, how to get here. They're the 3 things I need to know if I'm going to go. First of all, why should I go? Because I'm going to discover all these wonderful stories. And how do I do it? All there on the homepage straight away. So it's about thinking, what does the user need? What does the visitor need? What's the most important thing to tell them if they're coming to your place? And it's also about sounding inviting. You've got to make them want to come. You're inviting them in. You're bringing them to your site. And we're very lucky today that we can find out a little bit more about an organisation that's done this and has really thought differently about how to encourage people to visit. And that's Under 4 Yard in Bristol. And Sarah will tell us in a minute, but they went through quite a process to really think differently about how they talk to users, how they market themselves, how they position themselves. And they came up with this new tagline. Again, I will throw to Sarah in a minute to let her tell you more about this. But they made it very simple, a working boatyard that welcomes visitors, broke it down. So Sarah, if you want to join us, and I'm going to let you talk us a bit more through this, I'll put myself on mute, and you talk everyone through what you did to make a difference.
Thank you very much, Karen. So yeah, just a little bit of background. I worked at Under 4 Yard for just under 4 years. And when I first started working there, I was community learning and volunteering manager. And we were developing a brand new visitor centre, and I was going out and about all over Bristol, telling people that I worked at Under 4 Yard. And the most common response was, "You're under what?" Or "What type of yard?" And we realised really quickly that without some further identifying information, we were going to really struggle to get the message of our site across to people. So we started looking at how we could really simply explain what Under 4 Yard was to people. And we initially started using, which you saw on the previous slide on our website, the tagline, "Heart of the Harbour." We felt it was very poetic because we had hydraulic pumps on site that had previously powered the entire infrastructure of Bristol's floating harbour. But it didn't reveal to our audiences what that meant for them. We tested Heart of the Harbour with our audiences, and people said, "Oh, it sounds lovely, but still, what are you? What do you do?" So we tested different taglines and tried through a real process of trial and error to find the one that gave the clearest indication to visitors what the site was. So we went with the Ronseal approach, that it does what it says on the tin, and we ended up with a working boatyard that welcomes visitors. The key words that we incorporated was that we were a working site. We were not a recreation or a preserved site. It also helped us give a nod to the dangers of the site, which primed visitors that there were going to be different rules than if we were purely a visitor attraction. We also got the word boatyard in there because yard on its own could be one of many things. So boatyard immediately addressed that question of what sort of yard? And the words welcomes visitors. Under 4 Yard had been a site that for many years had permissive access, and we were moving towards a model of actively engaging and encouraging visitors because we were opening a visitor centre. So by sticking the words welcomes visitors, it immediately made it clear to people that they could come in and enjoy themselves and visit. We had physical issues around that people would get to the gates of Under 4 Yard and you would see people sort of glance through the gates and then back off and walk away. So making it abundantly clear at our entrance points that you could visit was really important. I want to say at this point, we did not do this alone. We worked with consultants, we had support, we had help. It was a process. It was not a once and done job, and this work is hard. It's not something that you can do all in one session, and this webinar can't possibly cover all of your needs. So I just want to take this opportunity as well to, and I'm going to pop it into the chat, is a little bit of information about support that you can apply for through the Rebuilding Heritage Programme. Karen will be delivering a follow-on training session called Organisational Storytelling. And it's a half-day course designed to support you to delve further into the techniques and approaches that we're covering in today's webinar. So if you feel that you need further support developing your organisational storytelling, then please do apply to the programme. I've included the link as well. And the applications are due in by the 27th of July. And as I said at the beginning, this is our last round for support. So please do get your applications in. And Karen, I'll hand back over to you.
That's great. Don't go off mute yet, Sarah, because I'm going to see if anyone's got any questions here. This is a good. We're about halfway through our five questions. Good point. Just to take a moment, take stock, and you might want to directly ask Sarah something about what they did at Underful. So if anyone's got any general questions about anything we've covered, or specifically about Underful, please do pop them in the chat right now. It's your moment. And while you're thinking about that, just to say, I mean, I didn't know I was going to get that little plug there, so thank you for that. That half day will definitely pick up. As you can see, I am whizzing through very top liney today. What we'll do on that day is spend a lot more time working in small groups. Very similar, I mean, we're working through very similar questions and themes as we are today, but taking a bit more time over each section, bouncing ideas together, building your story. And by the end of the morning, you would have written something actually physically that we've all shared and you've built on each other. And so it's a little bit more interactive and a kind of safe space to try things out, but basically covering very similar themes as today, but deeper and more. Going deep dive. So we have a question, which I'm assuming is for Sarah rather than me. Did you find any resistance to the rebrand, Sarah?
Yes.
Yeah, I could guess the answer, but go on.
Yes, we absolutely did. Underful Yard was a site that there was an awful lot of people engaged with the site who liked it the way it was, and it had been that way for many years. There was resistance to creating a visitor centre. So it wasn't just about the rebrand, it was the whole process of moving from a solely working site to a working site that welcomed visitors. And as such, that's sort of why I referenced the whole, it's not a once and done, it's not a quick process. This was a many years in the making process. So I worked there for just under 4 years. And through that time, the visitor centre didn't open all at once. We started bringing more and more visitors to the site, engaging with school groups and adult learners, and it was a learning process for everybody on the site, and especially around that kind of that key line of that welcomes visitors rather than will allow you to enter if we feel like it. So yes, but I think you sort of need to be prepared for that and build it in time to speak to people and have really clear and honest conversations about where you're going.
Yeah, I think that's a really good good answer, and I've been involved in rebranding as well with organisations, and it is about trying to take as many people along with you, but expecting people never like change, so there will always be resistance, and you just have to give it time, and then they'll forget there was ever anything before that eventually, and they'll all love it. But it's just about trying to involve as many people as you can in that change, so they feel ownership of it, and giving it time, allowing people to get used to it. So thank you for that question. Any other questions on anything we've discussed so far, please feel free to pop them in the chat. I can still, even if I start to move on, I can still see them, so it's fine. So thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. I think it's always much better to hear from people that have been directly involved in this kind of thing, to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So moving on from there, as I don't see any other questions. So we've talked a lot about the people that come and visit you, the people that come to your site, so assuming you are actually a site. But don't forget, obviously, you've got different audiences that you're speaking to at different times. We've primarily talked about your visitors till now. But now let's think a little bit, if you might want to talk to a funder, you might be writing a grant application. Now, some of the things we've discussed will be very similar, because a grant or funder will want to know what difference are you making, how are you helping people. That's very important for funding, so really important to think about that. And why would they want to give you money? Why would they want to fund you if you're not making a difference to other people? So that's something you really need to delve into, really think. What does the funder need to know? They don't need to know, obviously, about the opening hours and the detail. That's one thing that's going to be different. A visitor has practical needs that they need to know about. And if you're communicating with the press, you might want to tell the press something that's happening at your site or something that's going on that's different. The press really want to know, what's the angle? What's the story? What's different about this? There's obviously things going on in the local area all the time, but particularly local press will be interested if you've just got a little bit of an angle or a story, something. What they want to know is what's new about this, what's different. You've always been there. What are you doing that's different? And it could be as simple, particularly for local press, a new attraction, something different about the way you're doing things. Obviously, a campaign such as the swimming pool one that we've discussed, local press will definitely be interested in. Making sure people understand that there's a campaign going on in the local area. that is the kind of thing press would want to know about. And again, it's just about putting the story right at the top. So making sure they know local community members are getting involved in this campaign to save the pool. And, you know, just always thinking right at the top, what's going to grab a member of the press? What's going to get them interested in this story? What's new and different? And when you're thinking about social media, it's slightly different again, and that you're thinking about what's going to make somebody want to share this, what's making it shareable, because social media is all about being social, obviously. And what we often do is people will post things on their social media, though, you know, sometimes you do just need to share information. Here's our new opening hours, or here's, you know, we're open now since the end of the pandemic, or whatever. But sometimes you need to make people think, what will be shareable? And that might be something a bit quirky, a bit different. Going back to those personal stories we talked about earlier, you know, a great story, people are much more likely to want to share than just something informational or something about you and your organisation. So be thinking about each of those things depending who you're trying to communicate with. Right, time for us now to move on to our fourth question. So just to recap a little bit at this point, we've talked a little bit about what's your key story, what's the one thing that you can sum up about your organisation, what difference do you make to the people around you, you know, how can you tell that story through the people that you're supporting, the people that visit you, the people that you're making a difference to. Thinking about communicating, what do people really want to know, whether they're a visitor, a funder, or somebody who's looking at your social media. And then it's about how do you keep it really simple. And this is interesting. I think this is something we do sometimes forget. You know, we might have particular words that we use in our organisation that people out there don't use. We might have particular ways of speaking that are very much connected to the world we live in. And it's about thinking, how would your audience say it, or how can you use words that they would use? So don't, you know, always avoid any jargon, abbreviations, things that are only relevant to your world, your organisation. Keeping it really simple, clear language, and keeping it short. You know, sometimes it's just about being short, which is what I liked about this King Edward mine here. If you look, it's just very simple. You know, what will you do on your visit to the mine? What will you learn? And again, Sarah's posted the link to that if you want to look and have a think more about it. But just have a quick click and you'll see all the way through their website. It's short, set headlines. There's a bit more information under them, but just simple things that tell you kind of what will you learn, what will you do. You'll be led by a knowledgeable guide, and just keeping it really simple. It doesn't go into detail about mines and lots of language about, you know, mining detail and mining heritage. It's very simple and short and useful to the person that's going to come and visit. So how can you think about doing that for your kind of organisation? And as well as keeping it simple, it's also about thinking about what kind of voice you want to have. How do you want to speak to people? You don't want to be dry and academic or dull. Obviously, nobody ever wants to be dull. You want to sound warm and friendly. And this is a nice one, Milestones Museum. You know, they're talking in the first person here. We've dusted down our costumes. It's very conversational. We've polished up our vehicles, swept the seats, ready to give you a warm and safe welcome back. So again, it's not just we're back, or, you know, we've reopened under COVID safe conditions. It's welcoming, it's friendly. The picture matches it. You know, the man here, the guy who's obviously a guide at the museum, looks very welcoming to the children. It all feels warm, welcoming, friendly, as we said, and human. Always think about being a human, which sounds simple, but, you know, isn't always as simple as it sounds. So come and discover life in Hampshire Pass and visit our all-new Mr. Simpson's Teddy Bear Museum. Well, you know, you want to go when you see that. It makes it sound nice. It makes it sound friendly. So that's something to really think about, and think about how you can use that in your organisation. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over a slide. So have a think about that. Have a think about how you can do that. But almost in a way, I've kept it till further down, but almost the most important thing is what makes you different? What makes you unique? And there's lots of organisations out there, obviously. Lots of people are talking about heritage, talking about their organisation, asking people to come and visit. What is unique about you? What standout golden nuggets can you share about your organisation? So this is a good, I mean, going back to Underfall again, our heroes of the day. Nice, but I think someone mentioned this earlier, you know, behind the scenes, meeting the experts. This is lovely, a little time lapse, excuse me, of the Catherine being hauled onto the slip. You know, something behind the scenes. And a nice little, what I liked about this is the little detail that you're going to see Bristol's busiest dog if you click on this, and the dog that's at the site running around. And those are lovely little human moments behind the scenes, nice little peeks about, you know, what's different about Underfall, what makes it special, why would you want to visit there? So it might be your curators, it might be your staff, it might be your researchers, as we've discussed, it might be your volunteers. what insights can you give that are different, special? And that's the kind of thing you can share on social media that people will hopefully share with their friends, because it's something a bit different. And it doesn't need to be expensive or fancy. It could just be filming something on somebody's phone that's going on behind the scenes and then popping it on your social media. But it's about thinking a bit differently and thinking, oh, this thing's going on today at the site, let's film it, or let's take some photos of it. So, just thinking, what could we share with our audience? Those behind the scene things you might not think about sharing. You might not think that that's something you can put out there as part of your story, but they will be really interesting. I'm sure, your people will find that a bit different. So this is your chance again to have a little think. What makes you special? What makes you unique? What could you share? And again, I want you to really try and sell this to us. We've now got a few places that I'm definitely looking. I'm going to look back at that chat and want to go and visit some of these places. Make it really, really sell it to me now. What do I want to know about your organisation, your place that's really different, really special, that only you do? Have a little think again, another couple of minutes. I'll give you a minute here to do that. Okay, as ever, whenever you're ready, you've all been great about sharing your ideas, but if you've got any ideas to share with us here to entice us into your property, now's the moment to tell us something unique. And this is tricky. I do get that. I know this is difficult. I'm not saying any of these things are easy. I think we've kind of, as we've gone along, got harder and harder. So they are hard. It's not easy work, but it's important. It's worth doing. If you get to the hard bit, that's what makes you engaging and makes you different and makes you stand out. Everybody can talk about, we're here, we're heritage, we're doing something different. But if you can really push what that is. Okay, so we've got something from Francis, the only organisation telling the story of a former college. So that's great. And again, we might want to know a bit more. I keep doing this for you all, but what's special about that college? Why do I want to know about the story of the college? And that's something to think about. Go back and think, what is it that makes that really different? Why do I want to come and find out about it? We've got another one, the largest crowdfunding organisation supporting heritage in Egypt and Sudan. Now, being big, being the biggest or the best is always interesting. It's always a bit different. So that's useful. That's helpful. People might want to think, what's the largest? That's interesting. I want to know about that. So that's a good one. Again, what is it? What different things can your staff, your researchers, your academics, your guides tell us about the property? Well, that's nice. Thank you, Jane. So Jane is telling us, come and grab a coffee and cake in the Baths Cafe, which still has 4 of its original baths. The hot water is free, but you have to bring your own bubble bath. That's quite a nice little fact she's given us from behind the scenes. If we go, we can see an original winding wheel. All these things are great. They're all good thoughts. So thank you. What makes your story different? What's the one thing only you have got? And again, pushing it another level. Why is an original winding wheel interesting? What's special about that? This is the kind of thing where you could have a lovely video from somebody showing us. Obviously not now. I'm not expecting you to go away and do that right now, Lee. But somebody could show us the winding wheel, just a very simple one on a phone, and post it on a social media. What's special about that wheel? What makes it different? So have a think about how you can use little videos, little photos, people telling us something, showing us something. So that's more nice thoughts there. Thank you. And again, keep them coming. If you think of others, do feel free to share them as they come up. So, hang on, I've got another one here. Our team will bring art to your care setting so that your residents can experience world-class art from the comfort of their own. Well, that is really different. And again, I'd really like to see that. That's the kind of thing I'd like to see come to life in pictures or messages from the people in the care home. So that's really helpful. Thank you, Catherine. Yes, Christine says, explore the world's largest map collection and inspire your next adventure. It's been a while since we've been allowed to go on holiday. So she's bringing it back to the user. It's important to us. We can't go anywhere, but we can go and look at maps and maybe dream about our next holiday. Again, you could push that a bit further. Are you dreaming of your next holiday? Come and look at these ancient maps and see how the world was different in whenever, something in that. So again, it's bringing it back to your user, thinking differently. So these are all really good examples. Thank you. Really, really helpful. So for the final section, before we get to sort of general questions at the end, we've gone through some tips and some tools and some things to think about. And what I wanted to do now was just give you some really practical tips of how you can do this, because I know it's difficult. I'm not pretending it's easy. So the last 10 minutes or 15 minutes of me speaking before we get to questions, I just want to give you a few tools you can try and use. Be thinking now about questions, because I will throw you open to general questions in about 15 minutes where you can ask whatever you want about anything we've discussed today. So we've talked a bit about, obviously we've talked a lot about using stories, we've talked about using images, and we've talked about using videos. I'm going to give you a little bit more tips of some tools you can use to do some of these things. Photos are really important, particularly when we're talking about social media. Just purely factually, 87% of the most shared posts on Facebook contain a photo. And video is something that Facebook and other social media's algorithm really favours. So your posts, your things that you put out there will get shared a lot more if they've got engaging photos and video. And certainly for your website, it's going to really stand out a lot more if it's got that kind of visual element. And the websites I've shared with you today all have lovely visuals showing of the different things people can see. So what can you do if you don't have at your disposal amazing photographers or expensive photo libraries? I'll give you a few tips and advice. I mean, this is just one example again, but just another website using lovely photos. This is WaterAid, and they're bringing it to life just by showing photos of the people they've supported, just simple faces. But you can see what they've made a decision here to keep everybody looking very empowered, smiling, not victimizing people. And that's something you can think about. What sort of images do you want to show on your site? And we saw that earlier with the teddy bear, the lovely welcoming guide with the children. What's the image you want to give of your site? And that's something to think about. What kind of photos are going to make a difference for you? Now, if you don't have easy photos to hand, there's a few tools you can use. So this is one of them, Pixabay. Again, we've posted the link in the chat. It's basically a free photo library. So you could go to Pixabay, you type in the search here, image of child and, child walking into building or whatever, image of mine, it wouldn't be obviously completely specific to your place, but if you want to find slightly more generic images, you can certainly find that there, and they're free to use. That's why they're there, shared by other photographers who don't mind people using their photos. So have a look at that, something to think about if you just want to get some generic pictures for your, someone's posted their Unsplash, is exactly the same type thing. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, exactly. There's various libraries like this. Pixabay is one, Unsplash is another. But for instance, if Christine wanted to share on social media her post about the world's largest map collection and didn't have handy maps to show from the site, she could go to Pixabay, find a picture of somebody, packing their bags to go on holiday, looking sad, say, oh, you can't go on holiday, come and look at our maps or whatever. So it's just a way to illustrate your posts in a really simple way. Another site that I always recommend, if you don't have great graphic designers that you have access to or ways to really make your posts stand out, Canva's great. It's a simple tool where you can see here, basically they give you templates. So you can choose one of their templates like this, and then you just either upload your own photos or use theirs, and you can put text over it, and it just makes really simple, lovely posts for the kind of organisation where you don't have your own graphic designers or you don't have somebody available to you that can make interesting images for social media that people will want to engage with and share. And it could be as simple as, this is something I've made on Canva, some of these ones down here. You've taken a picture of somebody who's visited your site and just added words over it. Simple as that. Just nice, nice imagery, people holding up signs, telling us what they've learned at your site, or whatever it is you want to do. You can do lovely, simple things through using sites like Canva. So have a think about that. Have a think about the simple things you can do. And I always say to people, don't forget, your phone is now basically a camera and an editing studio in your pocket. You can go out, grab a very, very simple video and upload it to your social media without huge knowledge or experience or expensive camera operators. And they give lovely behind the scenes feel to sort of share with people that maybe can't get to you right now, but want to see what's going on behind the scenes. So final thing to think about is how can you make life easy? And I have made this difficult for you so far. I've asked you to do lots of things, to think about lots of hard things, but there's things you can do to make your life a bit simpler. And this is, I always talk about two things here: planning and becoming a storytelling organisation and thinking in stories. So what do I mean by that? It might be as simple as looking what's coming up over the next month, 2 months at your organisation and just keeping a spreadsheet where you can say, on that day we've got an open day for a local school, on that day so-and-so's coming to visit, on that day we're doing a recreation, and then working out what content you can create from all those things, what photos you can take, what videos you can have, what will you post on your social media. So you're not looking at a blank canvas every day. You've got content planned ahead, built up, and then thinking about, if you've got some of those things coming up, what are you going to need to think about? Is there a release form you need to take out with you to ask people's permission to take their pictures? Now, people often say to me, well, we can't take, we can't use pictures, it would break GDPR, we haven't got permission. And that's not really true. You just have to think differently. You have to think about asking for permission, making sure you've got it documented, and then you can use those photos as long as you've asked. And obviously, if it's a child, you need to ask an adult on their behalf. But have a think about how can you make sure you're always ready for that, so that you've got a big day coming up. You've gone out with a clipboard with your release forms on it, pen ready to get people to sign, you've got your phone charged, you can take pictures, or you've asked a local student to come and take pictures, whatever it is you need to do. But you've really thought about it, and you've made sure you're ready to go out and do those things that you need to do. And it's about thinking differently about stories. I don't know, obviously, how your organisation works, but it's about thinking as a storytelling organisation. So maybe you have a monthly meeting, and maybe at that monthly meeting you discuss what projects are going on at the moment, or what problems you're facing, what challenges everybody in the team's got to think about. But actually, maybe you should think about at that meeting, everybody brings a story. What's happened this month that's interesting at our place, whatever. What lovely story did you see? What person did you meet at the site? And if you start sharing stories and thinking about stories, you'll start to think differently, and you'll start to have stories that you can then share through your website, through your social media, press releases, however you're communicating, and definitely for funding applications. Making sure you know what's going on can just be sometimes about asking the guides at the grassroots, the volunteers who are meeting your public. You might not have thought to ask them before to share stories. So it's just thinking differently, thinking about stories, thinking about every opportunity that comes up at your organisation and how you can use it. So Sarah very kindly has posted some assets here that you can use. So do obviously click on those. I'm assuming we'll share all these links after as well, because we've shared lots of links with you, obviously. But things about how to use digital assets, how to use photos well, how to use video, is all really, really helpful. So have to think about that and what you can do about that. Again, I'd be really interested if anyone's got anything, if you've done anything like this, if you've got examples of ways you've taken pictures or you've shared video. It'd be lovely to hear about them in the chat, so feel free to share if you've got anything. Any questions at this point? I'm opening for questions now before we move on to the final summary. Any questions anyone wants to ask at this point? Nothing yet. Okay. So I'm going to take a minute really. Oh, do you need to have a consistency among stories? We have a question. Do you need to have a consistency? That's a really good question, actually. And it takes me back to my earlier point about what's your one message. I think you can tell lots of different stories. You can tell lots of different types of stories. But the consistency needs to be about what's the core message that's coming through. And this is where cancer research is a really good example. If you look at their social media, if you look at their website, they tell lots and lots of stories about different types of cancer, different types of people, but it always harks back to that core message. Because of research, this person's alive, or because of research, so-and-so is doing the race for life, or, so it's always keeping that in the back of your mind. You don't have to use those exact words all the time, but it's just keeping that thread running through. What's your core story, and what's your tone of voice? If your tone of voice is that you're very friendly and you're very conversational, keeping that going through all your stories. But you can have different types of stories. They don't have to be exactly the same. There's no rule about that. It's whatever works for you, really. And it obviously depends how much content you're sharing. And if you're going to be doing this a lot on social media, you will have lots of different stories, and you want them to feel different and unique all the time. So there's no one answer to that, I think, Milena, but there's, it is about the core message that runs through it all the time. I think that's something to think about. So just have a little think, just going back again. It's a pleasure, by the way, Milena, thank you. Have a little think now, just to recap a little bit, what are those absolute core stories that you're going to tell? What is it that why are you here? What is it that makes your organisation special? What difference are you making to the local community? How are you helping people? What are people learning by coming to you? Why should they care about your organisation? keep it simple, don't use jargon, don't use complicated language, and what makes you really unique, what makes you special, and what is it that the user wants from you, what is it they need to know. That if you think about those 5 things all the time through your communications, and I'll just take you back to that slide. I apologize, I didn't have it yet, but there it is. That's the 5 things you need to think about. Keep thinking about those, and that I think will be very helpful to make you think slightly differently about your stories. Think differently and hopefully grow the impact. And that takes me back to here. I want you to have, for the last thing I want you to think about for your work, I keep making you work hard, is I think it's very easy with these kind of webinars that you listen for an hour or so, you ask your questions, and then you kind of go away and you forget, what am I going to do about this? How am I going to learn something? So I think it's quite useful. This is just for you. I'm not going to ask you to put this in the chat, but just have a little think, again, another little minute of thinking. What 3 actions can you take away from what we've done today? And I've whizzed through it, and I'm happy now to ask questions and go back over anything we've discussed. But what can you do a bit differently from what we've learned today? Just have a think about that for 1 minute, and also think about any general questions you've got. And I will throw open to questions at this point when you're ready.
So whilst we're just waiting for our audience to have a little bit of think, Karen, about your 3 actions, which is great as a kind of kicking off point for people, and also just to remember everybody, please do pop any questions that you have for Karen into the Q&A box, and I will field them and read them out loud to Karen. We had some questions come in advance. So when you were signing up to the webinar, there is a section where we ask people what they're hoping to get out of their webinar. So we do have some questions that came in advance, Karen. So I'm going to start with some of those whilst we're giving people a little bit of a chance to think. So first question for you is there a difference between communicating about what you currently do and what you aspire to do in the future? And how can you find a balance between being honest about your current situation whilst looking forwards and being inspiring about the future?
That's quite a tricky one. So let me just understand that. So this is an organisation that's changing, presumably. They're making some kind of change? Yeah. So this, I suppose, is a bit like the one we saw earlier about the refurbishment program. It's if you're going through some kind of process, then it's about engaging the community to understand why you're going through that process and bringing them into it, and maybe even asking their opinion, bringing them involved in it. So I think it is important to share your future plans, to understand, to help them understand why you're doing it. But again, to go right back to all the things I've said, to make them understand why it's important to them. So I would again focus on, this is our future, this is what we're planning for, and this is why it's going to be better for blah blah community, X community. This is why it's going to make a difference to you, our people who live around us. But I think you need to keep both going, because people still need to know about what's going on right now, but there might be a place and an appropriate time to talk about what's coming and why it's important. So I think it's about balancing both, I think would be my thoughts there. I don't know if obviously when you went through this at Underful, Sarah, if there's anything different you would say, but does that?
No, I think you're right. I also suppose from my point of view, having done this piece of work, it's not feeling you have to stay wedded to a single message throughout, because the message does change, and as your work changes and your site changes, so can your key marketing messages. We've had a brilliant question come in live, which I'm going to take straight away, which is about the balance on social media. So engagement on social media typically dropping when talking about charity work, rather than sharing, the example here being lovely pictures of plants, and in my personal experience, lovely pictures of boats. So, and therefore the marketing team being reluctant to share too much around the kind of the posts that get less pickup. So how do you navigate that?
So which ones are they saying get less pickup? The ones that are...
So you get so my example was that when I worked at the boatyard, if I posted beautiful pictures of boats and the person's example was beautiful pictures of plants, you get loads of retweets, loads of likes. But if you're posting stuff around your charitable work or your engagement work, and my example being that if I posted stuff around my youth engagement work, the take up on social media was much lower. So how do you find balance if you're working with a marketing team that are keen on the posts that get the biggest take up?
Yeah, I think it's about balancing, because sometimes you won't always get the biggest engagement for every single post, but if you keep sharing certain types of posts that you think are important for people to understand, it will still get your message across. So I think you do have to accept not everything will get the same engagement. You know, if you're just going for engagement, then you'll just post funny cats all the time, but that's not going to be kind of exactly great for your story. But the one thing I would say is, if you're thinking about the charitable work or the work that you think is important, that's where you need to take on our kind of 5 lessons that we've talked about today. What will make that charitable work more engaging? Do you need to work a little bit harder, push a bit further? And, you know, maybe you're doing work with young people and you've said, look at this wonderful project we did with blah, blah school. Do you need to talk to the young people, find out their stories, find out what difference is made to them? It's not easy. I'm not pretending it's easy. You know, it's much easier to say, look, we did this project last week, aren't we marvellous? Much harder to go and talk to them and really find out a bit about what they've learned, or ask the teacher or ask the community leader, whatever. But if you can get engaging stories from those people, then they become as engaging as the pretty flowers and the boats and etc. So I think it's about taking all the things we've learned and applying them to all of your stories, but also accepting, you know, you might want to post your new opening hours, say, on your Facebook. That's not, it's just a fact. You know, you're not going to get huge engagement, but it's still important. So it's not only about chasing engagement. So I would say, you know, you might post once a day, you might post once a week, but keep the mix up. So you might have one really popular post, something that's just factual, it's not, no one's going to share it, but it's important, people know what time you open, or that you've got a new menu in the restaurant or whatever. And then your kind of charitable message, mix that up into the mix, and maybe it will get less engagement, but can you push it harder to get more engagement by the way you do it and the way you kind of tell that story? So hopefully that will be helpful.
I think that's a really good point. And I think the question of balance, what I would argue there with your marketing team as well, is if you are only leaning into the posts that get high levels of take up, then you are missing the full picture, the full story of your site, because most heritage organisations won't just have one really clear message that they're putting out on social media. There'll be lots of different elements. So I would say that to go back to your marketing team and make that bite, really, that actually if you're just focusing on the stuff that gets huge pickup, you're going to miss a huge chunk of the story.
Yeah.
Question that came in advance. So thinking about how you should change your communication approach when speaking to stakeholders with different interests. So for example, thinking about the difference when you're speaking to funders.
Yeah, so we touched on this obviously a little bit. Obviously with funders, you're basically justifying your existence. Why should they give you the money? And then it's really important to think about your impact. What are you doing that makes a difference? And you probably need to balance the personal side. You know, this is a story about some way we made a difference to this young person, or we talked a bit, the lovely example somebody gave us of going into the care home with art. You know, that's lovely. But then you probably need to balance that with some numbers. You know, we have reached blah, blah, thousand older people in the community through this project, and we've made a difference. We've made a difference to loneliness by reaching 27 care homes or whatever. But so it's about that balance between the fact, the story, the detail, the deep dive into one personal story, and the breadth, the numbers. And I think that's normally what funders are looking for. Like, what difference have you made? They want to know what's your reach, how many people are you getting to, but also what difference are you making to those people. So hopefully that's helpful. I can see one in the chat that's quite interesting about, if you don't mind me saying, Sarah,
please do.
Can you recommend an ideal way to store and share images and videos for teams working remotely? Because that's obviously when we talked about the practical tips at the end. You know, what are you doing with all these videos? I should have touched on that more, actually, so thank you for reminding me, Rose. That's actually a really important thing I probably should have talked about more. But what systems do you need in place? And that's something to really think about. You know, maybe there's 5 team members, are all taking pictures, are all taking video. There's no good, obviously, them just sitting on somebody's phone or sitting on somebody's computer at home. You do need them in a central place. And you need to think quite seriously about this, like, how are you going to file them? Is it going to be under the event, you know, this is blah, blah day, or is it going to be under types of pictures of older people, pictures of younger people, whatever? So you need to think between yourselves, you need a system that works. How do you find those pictures again? And then what you're asking here very practically, and how do you do it? I mean, Google Drive is a good way to do it. Any of the, you know, cloud systems, Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, you may have to, if you think you've outgrown your Google Drive, you may need to put a little bit of money in. You know, you can buy more storage if you need it. It doesn't have to be very expensive. But something to think about, do you need to pay for some Dropbox space or whatever? You know, it is important that you've got a shared space, that you've all got them together. Hopefully that answers that one for you. Jen says she's going to use the cat meme and analogy to go back to her marketing team. If you can't, you know, exactly. If you only want I keep wanting to say publicity, but I mean popularity, then all you would do all day is post funny cats, and that's not the only thing you're trying to achieve, obviously. So just remind them of that. You do need some reach and share and engagement, but it doesn't always have to be. Okay, so back to you, Sarah.
Just taking a question that came in advance about whether there are any checks and tests that heritage organisations can use to determine whether their statements are effective.
That's quite tricky. I mean, obviously, engagement on social media is one way. Are you getting the engagement you want? You know, I suppose you need to say to yourself, if you're thinking about a marketing strategy or a communication strategy, you need to be asking yourself, what does success look like? And I think we touched on that right at the beginning. What is success for you? And is success growing your social media? Is it more hits on your website? Is it winning a funding proposal? And the only way you'll know if your messaging is working is, have you done that thing that success looks like? So have a think about that. Have a think about what it is you want to achieve and try different things. I mean, if you send emails to your supporters, you can try sending different emails with different subject lines to group A of supporters or group B and see which one gets more clicks. I don't know if you use MailChimp or anything like that, but if you do, you can literally divide your list into A and B and try different options with each of them and just see, do you get more engagement with one or the other? And again, with social media, you can try posting a similar story in different ways and see, does it get more engagement when I do it this way, or does it get more engagement when I do it that way? And just get a feel for kind of what works and what doesn't, and do more of what works. Obviously, you know, look at your analytics. You do need to know what's working. When are people visiting your website? When are people going to your social media, or when are they engaged? What makes them engage? I think it's always worth. You don't need to know a lot about social media and analytics. You just need to know which ones get the most likes and comments. That's kind of the only fact that matters, really. What are people engaging with?
And I would say from my experience with the under full yard example, that when because of my experience of going out and about in those early months and doing outreach and hearing people saying, under what? We then came up with a range of potential taglines. And each time I was out visiting anybody delivering any sort of engagement work, I would just test out a tagline on them. I would say, under full yard, read the tagline to them, and then I would pause and ask them to tell me what they thought the site was. And that's where we discovered that this kind of Heart of the Harbour, which was our initial favourite, which we loved because it was very poetic, nobody really knew what it meant. And people essentially would just be like, well, are you in the centre of you're in the centre of the harbour, that's where you are, but aren't you at the west end? So we realised that what we thought was this beautiful tagline actually wasn't doing what we wanted. So by testing, just literally asking people, here's my tagline, what do you think this means? We got to that sort of, as I said, the Ronseal approach of doing what it says on the tin.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Thank you. Somebody's asked about wondering if you have any advice for managing digital volunteers, maintaining tone of voice and giving them useful feedback. That's from Rose. Thank you. That's a good question. So you've presumably got volunteers that are posting on your social media. I'm assuming is what you mean by that, by digital volunteers. Yes, thank you. So there it's about, you might need to think about almost something a little bit like this, some kind of webinar at the beginning. You know, when you've engaged your volunteers, do you need to run a little session for them where you go through with them, this is how we speak about our organisation, these are the kind of words we use. I mean, it could be as simple as just sending a nice PDF if you don't want to do the whole Zoom thing. But I think you do need to expect to tell them, like if you don't tell them what it is you're trying to achieve, obviously they won't know. So have a think about what's the best way to get that information over to them. Is it some kind of pack you send them? Is it some kind of live session that you run with them through Zoom? You know, keeping an eye on what they're posting and obviously then going back and saying, that was great, but have you thought about this? You know, just engaging with whatever they're doing and giving them advice and feedback when you see it. Because it's good that you're doing that. There's a lot of organisations are very nervous about allowing volunteers to, you know, to post or to talk about their organisation. People like to hold very tight control. But actually, by allowing more people to talk about your organisation, to communicate on your behalf, they're obviously now becoming ambassadors for you, and their networks are learning about your organisation. Now, you might not have many followers on your Instagram or your Facebook or whatever, but your digital volunteers are then reaching out to their network. So it is a really positive thing to do. It's just about slightly letting go of control in a bit. Now, they might not use the exact tone of voice that you would have used, but hopefully they'll still, you know, if you can give them a bit of advice and a bit of tips and tricks, they'll still follow along with whatever it is you're asking them to do.
I'm just going to drop a really practical one into the chat as well, which is there are tools, and the example I'm going to give is Hootsuite, that allows you to schedule social media, which means that you can get your volunteers to schedule social media posts into Hootsuite, and that works across a whole bunch of different platforms. And then it gives you some level of editorial control to be able to go in and just double check things before they go live.
I mean, it's also as simple as it might just be that you just have a shared spreadsheet in Google or something where, you know, they post there what they're going to post before it goes live. You know, absolutely, I mean, Hootsuite, absolutely right. You know, if you want to just do it in an even simpler way. And it might be that at some point you let go and you let them just do it, but maybe for the first couple of weeks or months, you want them to show you what they're doing before. Because it is about letting go of control. That is important, but also difficult. You know, people are often worried about what happens if I just let this person post. But once they've kind of proven themselves a bit, it is a very powerful tool that you're kind of at your disposal. There's a question about how can we hold our members' and visitors' attention over a 3-year delivery period? I'm not quite sure what that means. Is it honest truth? So you might want to give me a little bit more detail.
Whilst we're waiting for that to be clarified, a question that came in advance is how people can approach storytelling within the context of policy, and thinking about whether or not you have any advice for organisations who need to make strong arguments in quite a formal setting. So we're thinking here, Karen, not about visitor-facing organisations, but lots of our organisations who've been accessing support on the programme are organisations that are kind of advocacy and policy organisations working on that kind of more umbrella body basis, and their audience is either kind of local authorities or the government, or potentially the public, but the public not in a come and visit our site way, more in a here's something we care about and we need more people to care about way.
So I think the same principles apply really, whatever it is you're trying to do. Because even if you're communicating directly to the local authority or the government, they're still people. So you've still got to engage with them. They've still got to care about whatever it is you're trying to say. And if you give them a very dry document or a very dry, you know, policy, that they're less likely to engage. So it's still about trying to get them right at the top there, thinking, oh, this is interesting, and I really do care about this. You know, it might be as simple as, if you know, I keep using the swimming pool example because, you know, that came up earlier, but if it is about saving your local swimming pool, about engaging them right at the top, you know, this is a pool that's been used for 200 years by many members of the community. Obesity rates are rising in our area. There's not enough pool, you know, just really making it clear what the story is right at the top, and then going into maybe the drier policy stuff underneath. But, you know, just they still need to be engaged. They still need to care. They still need to know what it is you're achieving and what it is you're doing and the difference you're making. So to be honest, I feel like those 5 things we've discussed apply across all your communications. There's no, you tweak them and you use them slightly differently, but they really are kind of catch-all for all communications, really. I think even at the more sort of difficult, complicated end, you still need to want people to understand the difference you're making. And particularly, as we said before, if you're asking for funding, I think it almost becomes more important there.
And again, just taking one that came in advance, that people are wondering about selecting the right style and tone, and how strictly that should be implemented and or adapted for different channels.
That's a good question. Again, definitely adapted for different channels. You know, you obviously, your social media, you might want to be a little bit more casual because it is social media. You know, it's about sounding the way people do when they share things with their friends or family on social media. So that's probably going to be your most casual place. But as we've seen, sometimes people on their websites are much more informal than others, and that's a decision you need to make at a kind of organisational level. It probably depends on the kind of organisation you are. That was a teddy bear museum that we shared earlier, and that's obviously aiming at younger people. It's informal, it's fun, but it doesn't mean a more serious organisation can't take a fun tone as well. You just need to make a decision that that's the tone you want to take, and you do want to keep some consistency, but adapting to your, you know, to your various audiences. So again, for a funder, you're more likely to be much more detailed, going into much more depth about what you're doing, and maybe using much more organisational language than you would on your social media or your website, where you really don't want to be using any jargon at all, any kind of, you know, things that people out there wouldn't directly understand easily. So it's about thinking about that. Yes, I think there is a reason to be fairly, and this is come a few times, the consistency thing. I think you do want to have a bit of consistency, so it just feels like it's the same organisation. And that might be about having a bit of a style guide or something that you share with people. You know, you could write a guide of this is how we communicate. This is our brand, this is our logo, this is the way we speak. And I've seen organisations go as far as, these are the kind of photos we use, showing, you might have a guide that you share with volunteers, or these are the kind of pictures we use. I've seen an organisation that works with older people that has in their guide, we don't use pictures of hands, because it just looks really cliche, like old wrinkled hands. We like to use faces of people looking happy and active and busy. They say in their guide something like, we don't like to see people looking like they're not in control. We don't like to see people eating because it might be not respectful to them. So they're really clear about the kind of photos they want their volunteers or other people to use. So that's something to think about. If you really have a clear idea that you want to share with anyone that's doing your communication, put it into a simple guide, just a Word document or whatever you want to do, that says, this is the kind of language we use. We don't use this kind of language. These are the kind of images we use. We probably don't use these kind of images. And that can really helpful for anyone expecting to do it for you, because again, why would they know that if you don't tell them? So hopefully that's helped.
We have the clarification in the chat. So a concern around if you've been sharing the same message over a long period of time, that will people lose interest? How do you keep it interesting for people when the message doesn't change?
Yeah, so you've had a delay in the delivery of your Heritage Centre. I mean, obviously, I don't know if that's COVID related, because obviously then you can tell that story. This whole thing's going on around the world, and this is why it's delaying us. But you're right. I mean, you do have to keep people engaged. So it could be, is the delay itself the story? Is there a reason why there's been delays? Is that something you can share with people? Bring them into your world, help them understand the problems, and can they help at all with that? If it is just a delay for no good reason, then that might be trickier. But I think it is about just thinking, what's the, what different stories coming up all the time? What's new? What can you tell people that's different to what you told them before? It might be that it hasn't changed particularly, and then it might be trickier. But hopefully, I'm hoping, and I could be wrong, that the plans are getting more detailed, or that more, you're getting closer to the first day of actually, just telling them what the latest milestones are. Have you brought on board an architect, or have you brought on board a project manager, or are you planning? So whatever it is, keep them, telling them about those different milestones so that they know something's going on and something different has happened. But 5 years is quite a long time, so that can be tricky. I can't pretend it's not. But it is just about trying to bring something new to people, I suppose, and sort of tell them something different that you haven't told them before.
Yeah. So we are very nearly out of time now, and obviously with some of these questions we're getting into quite kind of specifics which are hard to answer in a webinar format. So I'm just going to post again in the chat the link to the information around the, I appear to have copied it twice, I do apologise, the information around the follow-up training session that you can apply for through the Rebuilding Heritage programme, which will be taking place in September. And that will be the opportunity to work in a small group of heritage professionals, delving further into the sorts of things that have been covered by Karen today. And you'll be able to work in small groups and actually kind of brainstorm some of this stuff together. So it'll be a much more interactive session where you can look at your specifics. Karen, I have got one final question for you before we close out the session, which is, if nothing else, what one action would you recommend that people take after watching this webinar?
That's a really good question. And actually, I sometimes repeat my first slide at the end, because actually that is the one thing I would say to people, which is to keep asking yourself that question. So what? Why should somebody care? I think if you haven't thought about that, you haven't got to that point where your story is going to be engaging or interesting, because it might be fascinating to you, but is it interesting to that person out there? So just keep asking that question. So what? Why should someone care? And maybe do what Sarah did, where she was asking other people, go out, ask your family, your friends, do they care about the story you're sharing? And then you'll get a feel for, is the thing that you think's interesting really the interesting thing? And that's the one thing I would take away with you. Just what really matters to them, not you. Turn your shit around.
Love that. I think, yeah, so what? So what is the one takeaway? I think that's fantastic, Karen. So thank you very much, Karen, for a really useful session. And I hope that our audience today have found it useful and are leaving the session feeling inspired to rethink their communications work. Please do look out for a feedback form that will pop up after the session, which will also be emailed to you. We really appreciate you taking the time to complete it, because it has helped us through the programme to plan the support we offer. And now, as we're heading towards the end of the session, end of the programme, it's helping us to provide information for the Lottery Fund and other support bodies to identify what the sector still needs. So please do fill out that evaluation form, and remember that the deadline for applications for the final round of support on the Rebuilding Heritage programme is 11 p.m. on the 27th of July. You can apply for just one, some, or all types of support. And if you are really struggling to know how to apply, what to do, we have got an intro to session running on the 22nd of July, where you can attend and meet myself and my fantastic colleague Vanessa, and we will talk you through what the Rebuilding Heritage programme can offer you and how you can apply. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much, Karen, and I hope you all have a fantastic afternoon.
Thank you, and thank you for getting involved, by the way. Final comment, I think everyone was great about getting involved in the chat, so thank you all so much for doing that, and have a good day.